7-win type teams. I can't wait to let 18 to 22-year-olds emotionally ruin me.
I made a call, to Vegas. I said, look, we actually need the favorite here.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Bruce and the Bear. I am Bruce Feldman. No Bear today. Unfortunately, he is stuck somewhere traveling en route to Columbus, so we're going to miss him. But he's always near and dear to our hearts. There he is, at least in spirit. Fortunately, we have Sammy P., our gambling expert, for the whole show, not just for part of it. Sammy P., thanks for bailing me out today.
Roar. That's the best bear I can do. That's all I got. Although I will tell you this, yesterday I almost didn't make my train because of a flood in Manhattan, and then a tree fell on the tracks on my commute back to Boston. So this was almost Bruce and Bruce, but we will make it work as we always do.
Well, I appreciate you being here and plowing through to make it work. Sammy P., some big news in college football this week. Really, the news that kind of has basically hogged the spotlight since Saturday night when Texas A&M embarrassed LSU in Tiger Stadium. Brian Kelly, of course, got fired the next day, and then days later, there was all kinds of drama with the governor of the state speaking about the search, and also then basically saying the AD, Scott Woodward, wouldn't be handling the search, and then Scott Woodward basically got forced out on Thursday night. Here we are, heading into the weekend, and who's going to be the next head coach is an interesting proposition right now in Baton Rouge. What are the prices you're seeing? What makes sense to you from your perspective?
John Sumrall is currently the favorite at Dave Mason's book Offshore, just shy of about 2-1. So 100 would win you 160 on Sumrall. That's a hot name. A lot of synergy there. Lane is not going to take all these jobs, though. I want to talk about Lane in a second. He's on every list, but the LSU list does begin with Sumrall, and then Joe Brady is on line number 2. But some of the things Bear and I have heard, and Bear's talked about this on the show, we don't know that Joe Brady wants to jump into the college ranks again and deal with recruiting and NIL. I think it's more likely he stays in the NFL, but when you connect the dots and you're booking bets on this, people are going to connect those dots and bet Brady to LSU. But John Sumrall is the favorite to be the next guy at LSU.
It's an interesting one. Like, I think highly of John Sumrall. Now, look, on Thursday night, his Tulane team got whipped by UTSA in a national television game, probably knocked them out of playoff consideration, dropped them to 6-2. He's a former SEC linebacker who coached at a couple of SEC programs. I think he is definitely a rising star. I just wonder, from everything I've heard, would LSU money people sign off on hiring the Tulane coach in Baton Rouge? I'm not sure that's a given. Interesting. I'm with Bear on the part about Joe Brady, the former LSU pass game coordinator when they were going great with Joe Burrow in 2019. I think he wants to stay in the NFL and has a better chance of becoming an NFL head coach. Of course, he's the Bills offense coordinator. The NFL assistant, I would keep an eye on, though. It's another coordinator with LSU ties, in fact, deeper ties at LSU, and that's Lions defensive coordinator Kelvin Shepard. He was on the 2020 LSU staff, former LSU linebacker. There's a lot of influential people around the program that think really highly of Kelvin Shepard. And to be honest, a lot of times when you do a coaching change, they often look for about a very different from what they just had. I'm not sure you can get much different than going from Brian Kelly to Kelvin Shepard. And he would be a first-time head coach. He's also probably could be in a deep playoff run with the Lions. But I think this is a situation where if he really wants a job, he's not the head coach in Detroit, where maybe you name him and just know that he has to have a staff in place, and he still rides it out with the Lions to see if they go to the Super Bowl or not. But that's a name. Again, I don't know if all the money people are buying in on a first-time head coach, but I know he has some legit support of some influential people there.
You're definitely going to see in these markets a lot of the same names. For example, Nick Saban is 75-1 to be the next LSU head coach. I don't think it's going to happen, but people want to bet it. People are going to bet Ed Orgeron. People are going to bet Urban Meyer. I don't think those are going to happen. What I can tell you, though, Bruce, there's a guy who was 65-1 a week ago to go to LSU. He's now 33-1. That's Dan Lanning at Oregon. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but they've taken a bunch of money on Lanning to go to LSU.
I think Dan Lanning is not going to Baton Rouge and give up what he has, and also probably a clearer path to the playoff. I don't know if it helped the job search that the interim AD Vern Osbury had said basically we should be in the playoff every year. That sets a ridiculously high expectation. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I also think let's just put the Urban thing out of that's not happening. You have a better chance of Urban bringing Bear as his strength coach to Baton Rouge than Urban going there. I just don't see it. But you said something that I think is key. Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, heading to the playoff because they're one loss or coming off a top 15 win on the road in the SEC against Oklahoma. He can't coach every job. He's in the mix at Florida. We think we know they have interest in him. Whether he would leave what he has right now in Oxford, which his whole extended family is settled there. They seem to be very happy. I think this job is a lot closer to Florida and LSU in terms of the ability to win. The facilities aren't as good, certainly in terms of home field advantage, but you do have a really good collective setup, which is pretty much as good as there is. For the Florida search, what are the numbers that you're looking at and going, okay, this is something that looks kind of tasty to me?
So they've got Coach Drinkwitz from Missouri as the favorite right now, although Lane was favored a week ago. Again, these are fluid markets. Money dictates how they swing. Matt Rule was favored to be the next Penn State head coach, and now that's not going to happen. So odds always change in these markets. But right now, the top three in terms of being the Florida next head coach, Drinkwitz, Franklin, and our guy Lane. Lane is on basically every list because I guess it makes sense. You use the term belle of the ball. There's Lane right there on line 3. I don't really think that they think he's going to Florida. James Franklin at 2-1. Wouldn't that be something if he went to the Swamp?
Yeah, I think from everything I've heard, James Franklin is a big target for Virginia Tech. I think he probably thinks he could get that job, but he might be waiting to see, does Florida State or Auburn open up, and could he get one of those jobs, which feels like it's a bigger job than the one in Blacksburg. I don't know if he can end up getting Florida. I think if Lane wants it, I think Lane could get it. I just don't know if he wants it. One other name to keep in mind at UF is Jed Fish. That's where he went to school. It's his alma mater. That's where he broke into coaching. He was a student assistant for Steve Spurrier. He basically left notes on Spurrier's car for like 400 days in a row until Spurrier was like, oh, who is this guy? And then he's done well. He's done well first at Arizona and now at Washington. I think it'd be hard for him to say no. If Kiffin doesn't do it, I wouldn't be surprised if Fish jumped at that chance to go back to his alma mater. Sammy P, I want to circle back on Brian Kelly's name. Obviously, he got fired. For less than 4 seasons at LSU. Where do the odds makers think Kelly's next move is going to be?
So he's not favored to go anywhere. Let's start by saying that. Like, they do have a market on Brian Kelly's next team, and Arkansas is the team at the top of that list, but he's not favored to be the next Arkansas guy. That's Rhett Lashley. But here's the order for Kelly: Arkansas, UCLA, Virginia Tech, Stanford, then Oklahoma State. I don't know, man. I don't feel like he's going to any of those spots. Do you?
No, I definitely don't see the South Bend to Stillwater, South Bend to Baton Rouge to Stillwater move. I think there's a better chance Brian Kelly, he loves to golf. I think there's a better chance he's golfing next year a lot. I think there's a decent chance he could be in a TV market, maybe on set at, I just threw it out at NBC, perhaps. I don't think Fox is in the market with Urban there and Coach Pete. I don't think ESPN with Nick Saban's there, although ESPN has a lot of airtime to fill. I would think that one other, a wild card job that's not even open yet that I could be like, I could kind of see this, is if Michigan State, where Jonathan Smith is struggling, if Michigan State somehow opened up. Brian Kelly did coach in that state at Lake Superior State. He also has a lake house up there. Maybe that's a place that I could see him going. I mean, I think that's more likely than Stillwater. I don't see him at UCLA. I just think that some of those other jobs, again, he's 64. I mean, I don't know how desperate he is to jump into this version of college football, which is a lot more nuanced than it was 5 years ago before NIL and the portal and everything else. And as for the Arkansas search, I know you'd mentioned Rhett Lashlee as a leader. I mean, he's an Arkansas guy. I just have heard that he may feel like he has a better situation at SMU. He certainly has a clearer path to the playoff out of the ACC than he would at Arkansas in the SEC, which has only gotten deeper. So on that, the other big job out there, and Bear's going to see these guys this weekend, is Penn State. Right, Matt Rule is off the board now. So what has risen up on the board from what you've seen?
The biggest riser, all the way to the favorite on line number 1, Brian Hartline. And sure, he's put some really nice receivers in really nice positions over the years. Is he ready for Penn State? I don't know. I'm asking that rhetorically. So he is now favored, per Dave Mason, to be the next Penn State head coach. Then it's Joe Brady. That's a lot more realistic in my world. He's about 175 right now, so 100 wins, 175. There's the connection between Brady and Pagula and Penn State. It just makes too much sense in my world.
I don't think he wants to come back in coaching. Now, he was a GA there under Joe Moorhead and under James Franklin for a little bit before he went to LSU, before he went to the Saints, then he went to LSU. I still don't think Joe Brady's coming back to college. Hartline is an interesting name. He's a terrific recruiter. He's obviously shown he can develop high-level receivers, and he's done well in his first full season as the offensive coordinator there at Ohio State. I don't know. This is a big job for any first-time head coach. Maybe, I don't know. That's to me. I was like, I don't know. We've seen some instances where first-time head coaches get big jobs. Obviously, Bob Stoops a long time ago got one out of Florida and got the Oklahoma job, and it went great. You see a handful of times it goes well. I mean, it didn't go well at Florida with Will Muschamp. I don't know. The name that's kind of interesting to me on Penn State, there's a couple that are in there, and one, Clark Lee, the Vanderbilt coach, who's done really well. The other one is Jeff Brom at Louisville. I just don't know if you can get Jeff Brom out of Louisville. That's his alma mater, like Clark Lee. He's at his alma mater. I saw you had the numbers on Brom are pretty deep down, right? Like, I mean, he coached in the Big Ten at Purdue and knocked off Urban Meyer's Ohio State team when they were rolling, and has won a lot of top 5 games. But is he somebody that the odds makers think is a realistic shot to get in there?
He has the same odds as Urban Meyer, but
Okay.
I think we would both agree the probability is a lot higher that Brom gets the job and not Urban. Here's what they do. They put these big names up and people bet them, and then they just have to move with the money. I don't think there's a chance Urban Meyer goes to Penn State, but people are still betting it. Jeff Brom and Urban Meyer, both 7-1 to be the next guy in State College.
I think Urban likes to hear his name being talked about on these things, I think. But I don't think he wants to jump into all this mess that college football is right now. While you'd mentioned it a little bit with in regards to, I think, Brian Kelly, UCLA's been open for a while. What are the odds makers looking at for that one?
Jed Fish, line number 1 at 3-1. Not as sure as they are about a couple of the other jobs. So 3-1 is a pretty juicy favorite, to say the least. Then Jonathan Smith, then Coach Prime on line number 3 at 5-1, right?
That's random. Wow. I don't see that at all. Jed Fish was an offense coordinator, and at one point was the interim at UCLA. I know his family likes it out here. And I know he has connections inside the program. I just think it's like I think he probably has a better job now, and I think Florida is a much better job in his eyes than UCLA is. I think they would have to move a lot of furniture around to get him to be enticed in it. A couple of names I think to keep an eye on there for the Bruin job: Bob Chesney, the head coach at James Madison, who was at Holy Cross. I know there's a little bit of interest on him. Jason Eck, whose New Mexico team whipped the Bruins early in the year. And then Brent Brennan, who is at Arizona, former UCLA receiver. I think he's somebody who has some connections there. I could see him there. I don't know if they would go Tony White. That's another former UCLA player who's a defense coordinator at Florida State. People like him around Westwood. It's just first time head coach. It's tough to follow first time head coach after, especially as bad as it went with Deshaun Foster, to then go to another first time head coach. But in fairness to Tony White, at least he was a coordinator. Deshaun Foster wasn't even that. So, we'll see how some of these parts move as they kind of get into really the carousel keeps spinning. A couple other jobs that could come open soon. Auburn, keep an eye on that. Florida State, that's another one to keep an eye on. A lot to kind of wade into, but I think we should talk about some of the bigger matchups this weekend. You want to get into those games, Sammy P?
Let's start with the big one in the SEC, Vanderbilt at Texas. I don't know, though. I don't know where I'm going to watch it if YouTube TV doesn't figure this out by tomorrow, Bruce. That's another conversation maybe for a different day. But Texas opened as a 3-point favorite in Vegas. The number came down to 1.5 early in the week. We are now back to 3. Bear and I have heard the same things. We talked about it on Thursday's show. We believe Arch Manning is going to play. I heard about 80% chance that he does go, although one odds maker told me Arch who, when asked how big the drop-off was between Arch and Matthew Caldwell. I think he was being a little facetious, but we have seen a ton of money Wednesday, Thursday, Friday on Texas. That line now back to 3, right back where we started.
Yeah, I would expect him to play as well. Now, the question is, they have not played very well all season. I'm interested to see how Vandy responds. You know, they're entrenched now in the top 10. They won without Diego Pavia playing like Superman, like wasn't his best game, but they're still, I feel like, playing with a lot of confidence. I don't know what the identity of Texas is. To me, this is feels must-win game territory for Texas, just in that you lose this game and all of a sudden it's like, what happened to us, right? You got a really good defense. I know the offense has been an issue all season. Fascinated to see which Texas team shows up. Also, if Arch can play, the little we've seen of his backup, he's been impressive. And it's just I think you want to make sure that if you're the guy, you're like, okay, we don't want to give this guy more chance to, not to say he would Wally Pip Arch, but kind of get where I'm going with that. The other big game in the SEC, Sammy, we have, and it's kind of intriguing because Oklahoma feels like they're starting to sputter a little bit. Number 18, Oklahoma at number 14, Tennessee. The Vols are a 3-point favorite. The Vols haven't really beaten anybody this year, but they had a close loss where they put up a lot of points against Georgia. What do you feel like is going, is Josh Heupel against his alma mater? What do you feel like the pulse is on Oklahoma? Do you believe that they're going to kind of start to bounce back? John Mateer has now had some games under his belt after not being able to practice and play for 3 weeks. They just haven't looked the same. Are they worn down? What's your sense of the Sooners?
Well, I think Mateer should be just fine, relatively speaking, considering how he looked in his first game back in Red River when he just couldn't throw the ball. It was basically covering his eyes and letting it rip and seeing where it goes. But the reports from practice have been good. And in terms of what the guys in Vegas are seeing, I talked to John Murray today, who said their smaller bets are on Tennessee, those $50 and $100 bets. Their bigger bets, the nickels and the dimes, are actually on Oklahoma. And if you look across the sportsbook landscape right now, this number, which opened at 3, seems pretty low. Tennessee only a 3-point favorite at home. You see some books now at 2.5. That's not little old ladies betting $10 moving that line, Bruce. The support financially is on the Sooners here, believe it or not.
Yeah, that's surprising to me, but can't wait to see how this one plays out. Because like we said, the Vols don't have any impressive win. So this would be an interesting kind of, it's an elimination game, but for the Vols, but it just kind of feels like that. Also in the SEC, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party in Jacksonville, Georgia, number 5 in the country. They're a touchdown favorite against a 3-4 Florida team. The Gators are a tough team to figure because they have a big time running back. DJ Lagway is a talented quarterback. They have good players in a lot of spots on defense. You sit there and be like, okay, they're talented enough to be dangerous. to me, when I look at it, is Gunnar Stockton's played really well for Georgia. I think the one thing that they can't afford against this team, because their Georgia's defense hadn't been great either, is we cannot give Florida some oxygen and we cannot give them some turnovers. If that happens, then I think this thing could get a little squirrely. Are you big on the dogs right now?
I know what's going to happen in terms of win-loss because Kirby Smart was on Bear Bets this week, and every coach who's come on the show has taken care of business during the weekend. So I know they're going to win. The question is by how many? The number is 7. I feel like you get to the break, you make the adjustments at half. I love Kirby Smart against this very, very erratic offense. It could be close. Maybe Georgia's up 3 or 4 at half, but in the third and fourth quarter, I do expect the dogs to pull away. I'm telling you, man, there's something with this Thursday Bear Bet slot. These coaches that come on, they win. Coach Silverfield last week at Memphis, they win outright in crazy fashion. There's something about the special Thursday slot on Bear Bets.
Wow, Bears good karma. Little does he know that. Probably he probably does know that wherever he is, somewhere stuck in the Northeast, trying to make his pilgrimage to Columbus. Let's get to the walkthrough, Sammy P. You always got good stuff in here. Let's get to where the game where Bears eventually going to get to, which is in Columbus. You have 3 and 4 Penn State against the number 1 Ohio State Buckeyes. They are an 18.5 point favorite. One subplot to this game that I'm interested in is Penn State defensive coordinator Jim Knowles, the highest paid defensive coordinator in the highest paid assistant coach in college football. He was the DC at Ohio State. There's a little bit of friction there with his old boss, Ryan Day. And you hear a little chatter about how that relationship was. It was probably less than ideal. I don't know if there was genuine bad blood. I don't want to categorize it in that fashion. But do odds makers sit there looking at that number going, yeah, if Ryan Day has a chance to really stick it on Jim Knowles, he's going to try to really run up the score?
Well, the market is believing in Penn State, believe it or not. This number was hovering around 21 midweek, Ohio State minus the 21, of course. If you look at it now and you just rattled off the price, 18.5, it's been a slow build of Penn State support. And one bookmaker that I talked to yesterday, he said their players aren't playing, but they got players on Penn State. And I thought that's interesting. That's a good way to put it. We know the talent is there, but they just haven't been performing. If there's one game, though, Bruce, to get up for, at least for the first quarter, second quarter, and see what you got and throw a big right haymaker and see if it lands, this is the spot. I mean, it's not difficult to get the troops up for Ohio State, right?
It shouldn't be, but Sammy P, whenever they played in a big game, they were always so tight that they didn't respond well to it. So I don't know which Penn State shows up. I know it's going to be one without Drew Aller, and Ethan Grunkmeyer is going to be, he's another one of these kids who probably grew up wanting to be a Buckeye, and he's not. I'm curious how he responds. Again, like I feel like this could be statement game for the Buckeyes. I don't know if they care that much about the upcoming first CFP rankings, but it's not like their resume is probably not as strong as some other teams out there. Again, I don't think Ryan Day really cares about where they're seated, but I could see, hey, let's just show Penn State and let's show everybody, hey, we're the best team in the country, and let's not give anybody any doubt here. Sammy P, the team that I think should be number 1 in the first playoff rankings come out is actually Indiana. I mean, they have that big win at Oregon. They've blown out a bunch of teams. If the odds makers saw this as Indiana against Ohio State as opposed to Penn State against Ohio State, how would they put the line?
So I was texting with Matt Metcalf, who used to direct the book at Circa, and he said Ohio State's 5 points better than everybody. Everybody, at minimum. Now, obviously, they're a lot better than a team like North Carolina. But the number 2 team in the country, whether you think it's Indiana or Bama or Oregon or Georgia, the number that Matt threw my way, he said anybody on a neutral against Ohio State is at least a 5-point dog. You start there, and then you build it depending on the competition. So hearing that and knowing Matt, if Ohio State and Indiana meet in the Big Ten championship game, his number would be Ohio State -5.
Do you see it that way?
I would like to see them tested. I would probably take the 5. and
Okay.
then hate myself when Indiana loses by 14, because that's probably what's going to happen. But the odds makers, I'll put it this way. Indiana to start the season was ranked about 28th or 29th in most people's power ratings, and now they're second or third. So let's give Coach Signetti all the credit in the world. All summer, we were asking and talking, who's this year's Indiana? Indiana. That was the answer all along.
And they have shouted it out on social media, and good on them, because they've backed up the talk, like especially that big road win at Autzen. So we mentioned a little bit ago about Rhett Lashley, the SMU head coach. His team is a sizable underdog. They're a 10.5-point underdog against his former school. He was Manny Diaz offense coordinator when he was at Miami. So they play the Canes. How do you see this one setting up?
I took the points with SMU. I took 12.5. We talked about it on Thursday's show. The number now 10.5. We've seen a steady flow of sharp support for SMU, including one bet. Somebody rolled into Vegas and laid $30,000 on SMU plus the 12.5. Mario Cristobal, last 14 games in November and December, 4-10 straight up, Bruce. We love Miami, but they got to win these games. They have to take care of business.
Wow, that is a good stat and a good detail. All right, Sammy P, I think we've made it this far to get it through the show without our fearless leader. So, as always, I think you should give Bear's tagline, because you know more about betting than I do. So.
I believe it's the less you bet, the more you win when you. No, I should have practiced this. The less you bet, the more you win when you lose.
There you go. By the way, it's on the back of this T-shirt. So, but I don't want to turn around and give my back to the audience. But yes, it is. So, anyway, thank you for carrying the load today, and we will see you guys next time.